Welcome back. I'm Devin Dole, and I want to tell you a story. I started this this series, whatever you want to call it, with the first poem being in my second poetry book, Words of the West, Volume 2. The second one I want to do from my first book, Words of the West, Volume 1. Imagine that. First book is called Volume 1. And in this series, I just read you one of my poems from one of my books, and then I tell you the story behind it, because I think we can all use a little bit more storytelling in our life, right? We've been talking a lot about this lately at work and just in content stuff in general, but the power of storytelling. And if you listen to the first episode in this series, I kind of explain why I'm doing this and why I want to do this, but the gist of it is that we're all bound together by stories, and I really think that's never going to change. That's part of the human fabric that makes up the tapestry of mankind. And so I want to read you a poem from Words of the West, Volume 1, and then I want to tell you the story behind it, because that's what we're doing. So this poem is called The Hubris of Man. And in my poetry books, I have the poem, and then I have some snippets or some like cowboy wisdom or something like that. I have some photos that are either of me or friends that I asked to be in the book, or just kind of Western ranch lifestyle type photos. But The Hubris of Man is the first, excuse me, take that out, 154. The Hubris of Man is the second poem I would like to read you and then tell you the story behind it. I often think of the ones that came before. I see them in the arrowheads, the teepee rings, the rotten wooden boards of long ago structures, languishing in the shadow of time's unyielding hand. Reclaimed by nature, a harsh reminder that we're temporary fixtures, easily replaced and forgotten. Only man is naive enough to care about legacy, carrying around the flawed belief that our walls will stand the test of time. Living 10 feet tall, intent on being recalled, leaving a mark, the hubris that is the belief we could ever lay lasting claim to this world. It is evident in the remnants of these long-forgotten buildings that when she is through with us, this earth will shake us off her back like a wet dog, freeing itself of a troublesome load. The wind that was here before we cast footprints in her moss moans through collapsed windows, and ghosts of bygone days linger among the rubble as a reminder that we may build, construct, erect, and try, leaving that legacy, but the trees will grow through the boards. The rain will wash away our scent. The nails will fall prey to rust, and the wood to rot. And like all else before us, time and the elements will slowly erase our presence, and our legacy will only last as long as Mother Nature permits it. So, that's The Hubris of Man. It's a little bit different than the Western ranch poetry that I typically write, but there is, of course, a story behind it, as there's a story behind everything that everybody writes, every writer. So, for this poem, I wrote this a couple years ago. I had been on a hike up in the Wyoming mountains with my little Josie dog, who is no longer with me, but she is always with me. She's in the picture behind me. She's in the fur that I carry around in my little paw print keychain. She is in my heart forever. She is firmly stamped on my soul. She is always with me. And so Josie and I, before I met my husband, I spent a lot of time alone. And by alone, I mean with just me and Josie. We lived alone. We camped alone. We rode alone. We hiked alone. We swam alone. We did a lot of things, just the two of us. And so Josie and I were on a hike, and it was a really beautiful summer day, lush green grass, right? And the Wyoming mountains, it never gets too hot. And so I was, like warm from hiking, but it's not like it was blistering hot, which is a beautiful thing. And we're taking this little tiny kind of rocky trail. And we're just, Josie's up ahead. She never ran off, never had to worry about her running off. She's bounding along up ahead, right in front of me. And I see her kind of take a different trail. The trail kind of branched a little bit, and she took the one less traveled. Imagine that, Robert Frost. And I thought, well, I'll follow her. We can find our way out of here. And so I followed her, and she kept going. She just kept getting deeper into the woods. And these aren't like aspen stands. These are kind of thick, like pine trees, right? Which one of my favorite things on a hike is to break off a few of the pine needles and crush them between my fingers. And just that smell will linger on your hands for a very long time. And it's just intoxicating, right? And so Josie goes off down this trail and I follow her because of course I'm gonna follow her, right? She was the boss. She was a little corgi dog, so very opinionated. And we end up standing in front of this decrepit, abandoned, rotting cabin. And I love a cabin. I love a homestead. I love an abandoned farm. I love anything like that. I don't need to go in it. I can appreciate it from the outside, but I will take a photo of it. Them's the rules. If we're passing an abandoned homestead on the road, we're gonna have to pull over, and I need to take a photo and add it to my collection. So we're standing in front of this cabin. I'm not really sure how we got there, but it was like it lured me in. There's no one around. It's just me and my little dog. And I was just overtaken by what I was looking at because I'm a historian. And all I could think was who is here? Who built this? Who lived here? Who carried all the equipment in? Who carried the glass panes in for the windows all the way back here? Who packed in supplies either on a horse or a mule or on their back? I was just like blown away by this. And there was a little creek running right in front of this cabin, really beautiful little creek. And I thought, well, this is probably where they got their water. And so my assumption is that this was a mining cabin, right? And obviously had been left unattended for quite some time. And I'm sure, this was on state land, so I'm sure it was somewhat preserved by the state. But I walked around it, and there really wasn't much left inside. What was left inside was the remnants of a cot up against the wall where it had just been built into the wall. And, I imagine they laid out a bedroll or something on that cot. And then the remnants of kind of an old wood stove area. And then just a one room. This was just a one room cabin. Some of it was almost completely rotted out. Parts of the floor where you could see the moss underneath and the grass growing up under the floor. And then parts of it looked like it was in pretty good shape, and maybe it was just the way the wind was hitting it. But I went inside and carefully, right? There's a lot of nails and rusty objects around, and we walked around outside, and I ran a hand over these weathered, rotting wooden planks that made up this cabin. And I thought it's so easy to imagine it always looked like this, right? It's so easy to look at this old weathered cabin and think it's just always been here, just like this. But it wasn't. At one point, it was brand new. It was brand new. It was built tight and right and with loving hands because this was going to keep somebody warm and dry. They wanted to put effort into it. Somebody laid on that cot every night, probably with their hands clasped behind their head and stared at the ceiling. And maybe the ceiling wasn't sealed all the way and they could see a glimpse of that Wyoming night sky through it. And somebody built a fire in that stove and cooked their breakfast. Somebody hauled water from this creek and drank it, bathed in it. Somebody worked around here. Somebody lived around here. Somebody hoped and dreamed and prayed and laughed around here. And I just am so overwhelmed, one, by the thought of who came before. And, in this poem I say I often think of the ones that came before. I see them in the arrowheads and the teepee rings and the rotten wooden boards of long ago structures languishing in the shadow of time's unyielding hand, because when I see the teepee rings or when I see the abandoned homesteads or the decrepit cabins, somebody lived there. Somebody just like me in the sense that they were human living the human experience. And I think that can be a comforting thought that we are just a tapestry woven together, right? Mankind, society, humankind, we're just a tapestry woven together. And I also can think it can remind us how fleeting time is, how fleeting life is, and what we think about legacy. So, this cabin, right? Josie's sniffing around, and don't worry, I'm keeping an eye on her. I don't want her to step on a nail or something. I could pack her out if I needed to, but she wouldn't have enjoyed that. So, she's sniffing around, and she just goes and lays in the grass in the shade next to the crick. And I'm just kind of poking around and being very respectful. I would never, hurt anything. I would never take anything with me. I'm just looking at it. And I can just hear the wind, moaning through the cracks of the boards. And I can see the moss growing along the sides. And I can see where the crick has split off a little bit and started to run underneath the cabin. And it really was this like heavy reminder of we are permitted to stay here, right? And the earth lets us build on her, but God gave us this beautiful earth to make ours, to make our home. But when we're gone, how quick she reclaims her land. And so I sit down next to the creek next to Josie, and I usually carry some sort of like little notebook with me, my pack or something. And I took my shoes off and I put my feet in the creek, and it was just warm enough that it felt really, really good. It was refreshing, right? And no bugs, no mosquitoes, which was pretty surprising. And I just sat there, my feet in that creek, stared at this cabin, my dog just napping by my side. And I thought, there's something here. Somebody that lived in this cabin at one point probably never thought it would end up looking like this. Somebody, when they built this cabin, probably thought it would stand forever. Or at the very least, they couldn't look far enough into the future and picture it crumbling like this. And I think that's just the hubris of humankind. And we're all that way. The house I live in, I can't imagine, standing 100 years from now, but being a shell of its former self. That's really hard for me to picture. And I don't think we're designed to picture the future like that. But we do carry around this belief that our walls will stand the test of time, I think. And by walls, I mean our physical walls, but I can also be referring to our legacy, our name, everything like that. And I mean, I definitely think that we all leave some sort of legacy, and hopefully we all leave a positive one. But when it comes to a lasting stamp on this earth, in terms of a physical stamp, all I could think about looking at this little cabin was, can anything really stand the test of time? Or can it only do that as long as it's permitted to by Mother Nature, by the earth? Because, like I said in my poem, the rain's going to wash away our scent, and trees will grow through the boards, and the walls will crumble, and the nails will rust. and when we build these things, we never picture that happening. And you can take from that what you will. I don't think, I never meant it to be like sad or despondent by any means. I more meant it to remind myself how fleeting life is and how beautiful life is and how incredible it is to be able to, put a stamp out there and build something and look at it and just see it in its prime and live like it's always going to be in its prime. That's very, very cool. So the hubris of man, the arrogance of man, is to think that it will always look like this, that what we construct will always stand. And the earth will remind us that that's probably not the case. But somewhere down the road, right, somebody will look at that structure and remember the person that put it up. They don't know that person. They don't know their name, probably, or what they looked like or what they did. I don't know who lived in this little mining cabin. I don't know if they lived there all year round. Probably not. I don't know if they were a good person or a bad person. I don't know if there was one or two or, however many folks lived in this cabin. I don't know what kind of ilk they were. I just know that they were a human being, like me. And then at one point, that cabin was full of life and laughter and sounds and emotion. And then the way I saw it that day, it sat quiet and lifeless and empty. But I think if you stop and you listen to places like that, you can still hear the past. It looks empty and quiet and despondent and sad, and and crumbling and rotten. But if you just sit down with it and listen and let yourself just be taken back into the quiet, you can hear what came before. And of course, like I always note, maybe I think a little bit differently just as a historian. I'm always looking in that direction. But I wanted to share with you the story behind this poem and how I can remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a beautiful summer day. Everything was so green. And Josie and I hiked back in there. She chose the trail, and it took us to this cabin. And I sat with my feet in that creek, and I stared at this cabin, and I just tried to remember memories that I've never had. And I tried to put myself somewhere I've never been and meet people I've never met. For a second, that cabin came alive. And for a second, I could hear the noise, and I could smell the smoke. And I could hear the laughter or the clinking of metal. And then I was reminded, looking at it closer, where I could see the sky through what was left of the ceiling, and I could see the ghost that lingered in the rubble. I was reminded that what is built will always stay, I think, in some regard, but on the terms of Mother Nature. And that's pretty cool. We're guests, right? I do believe that. God gave us this earth to build our home, to eat, to tend, to toil, to grow. But we're guests. And she took that cabin back. Not all the way. She left enough as a reminder of who came before. But I just thought that was a really, really cool experience, and I wanted to share it with you. I wanted to share the story behind this poem. And I was reading the bottom of this. I quickly wrote this poem down while sitting next to an abandoned mine and the decrepit homestead next to it. I was soaking my feet in the stream that ran through the valley after a long hike and listening to the wind moan through the rotted wooden boards. All I could think about was who had been there before me and who would come long after I was gone. And whoever was there before and whoever would come after, we're all still connected. And I hope that cabin is still standing in some way, shape, or form in 100 years from now. And I hope that that place remains untouched. And I hope that somebody wanders up there with their dog and puts their feet in that creek and sits there and stares at that cabin and wonders who came before. So there's my second episode of Words of the West in this series of telling you the story behind a poem, reading you a poem, telling you the story behind it. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I should keep things to myself because I know that might sound a little silly or cheesy or woo-woo, but I mean, I just have a hard time not looking at the world around me as just a big connected experience of all of us. And I really do have a love for old things and abandoned things. And I am really of the mindset that we shouldn't just be so quick to forget because it's old or because it's out of date or because it's, been left to sit for years. I just think if you give those places a chance to sit there in the quiet next to them for a second, they will come back to life if you listen. And that's pretty cool. So, thank you for joining me. As always, so glad that you're here. So grateful that you're willing to give up 20 minutes of your time to listen. And this is on YouTube. And then, of course, will be on my podcast channel. And I've got plenty more episodes coming. And I would love any feedback that you're willing to give. You can DM me directly, or you can always email my podcast email, thewestwardpodcast@gmail.com. And I'm just very grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope that you have had a wonderful day. And I hope that you're looking forward to summer. And I hope this summer you get to take a nice little hike with your dog or your family or your kids or just yourself if you want. Put your feet in a creek and sit somewhere where others went before you.